Magid part of the seder, the part that actually tells the story, I think most of us are often troubled because it doesn't seem to make sense. The different pieces of the Haggadah that tell the story seem to be very piecemeal and not connected one to another, and we wonder why couldn't we have just told the story from the book of Exodus straightforward. Dr. Gesundheit suggests that if we actually look a little bit more into the organization of this section, we'll notice that it makes a lot more sense when you think about it as 4 retellings. He says, the first retelling starts with questions, the Manish Tana. From the Manish Tana, we give an answer, the first retelling, which we call Avadim Hayinu, which discusses that physical oppression, the status of slaves in Egypt. That retelling ends with praise to Hashem, when we thank Hashem for giving the Torah. The second retelling also starts with questions, this time in the form of the 4 sons, each one asking in his own way about the Pesach Seder. We answer that son with a section called Mitchila Ovdei Avodah Zarah Hayu Avotenu. In the beginning, our forefathers were idolatry. This forms a second retelling, focusing not on the physical oppression, but on the spiritual. This section too ends with praise, as we thank God for keeping His promises and saving us every generation. The third retelling doesn't start with questions, but it's rather aimed at the intellectual. It's the textual retelling, when we look to the verses in Deuteronomy, which in 4 short verses retell the story of the Exodus. This is the section of the Seder that we refer to as Arami Oved Avi, since those are the first 3 words of these verses. And we go into every single word. That section too ends with praise of God in the form of the liturgical poem Dayenu. Finally, the 4th retelling of this story, again, one that doesn't start with questions, is what we might call the experiential retelling. It's the section that starts, Rabban Gamliel Hayal Meir. Rabban Gamliel used to say, we should talk about Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Here we have our visual objects, the matzah in front of us, the maror, and we point to each one in order to retell the story through objects. This section too ends with Hallel. I hope that gives you a little bit of an overview of how to think about your Magid section of the Seder, and wish you a wonderful Pesach.